Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm your host, Amin Dylan, and today I'm chatting with Pallavi Sharda. Now, you know Pallavi from a number of her big hits, everything from My Name is Khan to Besharam to Beecham House. She's actually really become a worldwide actress, having worked in Bollywood, Hollywood, Australian, and British cinema. How cool is that? Now, a little fun fact for you guys. I actually know Pallavi from our beauty pageant days. Yeah, we actually were both in the same pageant, Miss India Worldwide. She was Miss India Australia, I was Miss India Canada, and yeah, it's been like 10 years since I last saw her. So I'm really excited to get reunited with her today on the show and really just find out how her journey took her to all these amazing places and to work in so many different projects. It's going to be really cool to catch up with her. I mean, we've got 10 years to catch up on. And before we get to that, I just want to quickly remind you that if you like these type of videos and you want to see more videos like this, be sure to subscribe to my channel. Also, be sure to like this video and leave me a comment. All right, guys, let's get to it. Here is my exclusive interview with Pallavi Sharda. Hey, what's up? I'm Amin Dylan, and welcome to my podcast. I'm sitting down with the movers and shakers and the stars to chat about life, love, business, and being a total boss. It's raw, it's candid, it's the stories behind the headlines. This is In Conversation. Pallavi Sharda. 10 years later, reunited, and honestly, we're very long overdue for a reunion, really. So,
I know.
hi, how's it going?
Hi. It's going well. I'm in lockdown in Melbourne in my now study, which was my brother's childhood bedroom. I came back here in March when everything went crazy, and I haven't left since. So it's an interesting time, but all good.
But it's nice that you're getting that time with your family because it seems like always in a different country, always on set somewhere, right?
Yeah, it's actually for me, I think, a lot of my friends have been like, are you okay? Because you kind of need to be on a plane going somewhere every few days and you physically can't do that for God knows how long. I'm like, I'm fine. It's going to be fine. I'm just trying to concentrate on the fact that I'm getting this very special time with my parents. I haven't lived with both of them since I was 17 years old. It's because my mum lived in Perth and she also has come here for the lockdown. So yeah, it is what it is.
So let's just actually start off by talking about the last time I saw you. We were both at the pageant. I'm like,
wait, can we not say pageant? Can we call it something else?
What should we call it?
A friendly meet.
Okay, friendly meet where there's lots of glitz and glam. How about that? But you're actually not my first meetup girl. I've actually had other meetup girls on the show. Yeah. So it's really cool because it's like family, right? It's like distant family where you don't see each other, you don't talk to each other all the time, but then you kind of see them pop up and you're like, oh, that's amazing that she's gone on to do this and this. So that's why it's like, when I was thinking about the last time I saw you, I was like 10 years. It flew by. It really did.
It did fly. I literally don't feel like a different person. I should, because a lot's happened, but maybe it's coming back to this space, which I feel like it's been a vortex of time, because that's since I last saw you, is exactly the 10 years that my whole journey has kind of been so nuts. And it's strange because you're right. We only spent like 2 days together because I came in late because of my injuries, if you remember.
What was it? You were running and you fell, I think, right?
Just out here. It's funny. I was walking the other day going, oh, this is bad trigger. I was running because I used to run a lot and I haven't run since. And there was a chain and I was sprinting and there was a chain blocking a driveway that I was running through and my foot caught on it and I literally flew and my whole chin split open. Look at the scar on my hand.
You still have it.
Oh, it was bad. Remember how my hand was bandaged up? Like I
remember your chin because
I couldn't move my hand. When I performed with one hand.
Oh.
It hurt so much. I have a really funny story from the meetup about why this scar is so bad, actually.
Why?
But so do you remember we had like interviews with a radio station and Akon was there?
Yes.
Right? right? You're the first person I can tell this story to. You'll appreciate it. So I was just like hanging back because everyone was like, it's Akon. And to be fair, I am like just not a very starstruck person. And I was just like, I'm cool. I'm going to be all up in this. And he walked up to me and was like, how you doing? And I was like, I'm good. And I'm like, don't shake my hand. Don't shake my hand. And he grabbed my hand and he shook it and he tore the stitching apart.
Oh, shoot.
And that's why it was so painful. And so I got my wound because we were in South Africa. And then I went to India straight after that. My wound healed without any stitching. So Akon did this. It's like my wound of glory.
You know, if I ever get him on the show, I'm going to bring this up and I'm going to be like, this is the impact you've had on people.
I know, like this 20-year-old thing was like, don't press my hand. But anyway.
I love that you brought that up though, because sometimes when I tell people about the pageant and what it was such a blur, but I do remember that mall experience and Akon. And I'm like, that is really weird that we were at a mall with Akon. Like, that's a weird story.
It was a really bizarre few days. I mean, I think, you know, like for me, the reason to even be a part of it in Australia stemmed from like a real passion for cross-cultural identity, which now kind of rings through all the work that I do. And kind of wanting to talk and influence policy more in Australia because, you know, in Australia, there really hadn't been young female leaders of the Indian community. And I knew with like my background in law and so many things, that would just be a feather in my cap that might be of assistance. It was literally like a really nerdy reason to do it. So I was so just a fish out of water in that environment of like, you know, I remember you being there and like Soham and, you know, like a few girls and I was like, all right, we can be normal. But the general kind of, you know, the pressure that one puts on themselves in that scenario. I mean, I remember like the prize I got was like the girl that makes people laugh or something. I don't know if you remember this, but I got some like award. I got like an award for being funny.
Oh.
That was my only award. That was all that I got.
I'm trying to remember if I won anything. Honestly, it's like a blur. I feel like it was like high school for me. I feel like we went to school.
Well, we were probably still just all out of high school, quite frankly, like only a few years out. So
we were young. Yeah.
Anyway.
I remember the last time I saw you, we were all on the plane to Mumbai. I remember it was you, me, Miss India, a bunch of other girls. We were all on the same flight going back to Mumbai. And that's the last I saw you. So I was like, okay, then obviously acting happened. So at that meetup, had you already decided I'm now going to pursue acting full time?
I'd already shot my first film that year. My first film with Manoj Bajpayee called Dastula, I shot in January of that year.
Oh, was that before the meetup?
That was before. Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was after because I saw it was the same year, but I thought it was after.
No, I'd already shot it. I'd already been to India and like this thing, I just happened to be in Australia finishing my law degree. I was like traveling between India and Australia during the like, you know, mid parts of my university education, because I knew I wanted to go to Bombay and it was always sort of what I was going to do. And yeah, so I actually, but that trip, it was after that trip that I moved to India, that it wasn't just like, okay, I'm like stopping in, seeing what it's like, you know, and I got a place and I put some roots down and things like that. And my first film came out that year. But then, you know, doesn't matter if your first film comes out, there's still like, you know, a hustle and a struggle involved after that. Particularly if you're doing indie cinema like I was, which was more kind of theater actors and a little bit more indie and new wave, not your mainstream Bollywood stuff. So, you know, that's how I started out, because I really didn't want to get into mainstream Bollywood straight away, or I wanted to kind of explore that new cinema world that was starting to kind of erupt in Bombay, very, very low key. But yeah, it was actually odd that I'd already shot a film and then I was in that environment, because I kind of it felt like I was stepping between these two worlds, and a lot of people were like talking about performing arts, but I actually didn't talk about the fact that I'd shot a film already, because I didn't want to seem like too much. And I think this is one of the problems that women often face, where, you know, you can't, and especially so young, right? Like I didn't have the confidence to be like, hey, I've already shot a film, which is an exciting thing. And you should have girls that are really like rallying behind you. But there was a paranoia in me that wouldn't be the case. So I really, now that you've mentioned it, I remember keeping it on the down low very, very consciously.
Yeah, because none of us had any idea, like thinking back, that you already had films under your belt, right? Like to me, I feel like when we all went on that flight back to Mumbai, we were all like, okay, we've done the pageant. Let's try to try to open doors with this, right? And it's interesting
Yeah.
that you already had put in the
I'd
work to
already
get your
shot
career
3
going.
films.
Yeah.
I shot 2 as the supporting actress and 1 as a lead. Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So tell me then, if you weren't actually in Mumbai full time, what was the experience like for you to be actually getting these films, right? Because we have always been told you have to go live there. I interview
I mean,
so many actresses.
I was there. I was definitely there, but I was like bag lady, like moving from place to place and, you know, like sleeping on couches and subletting rooms and paying guests and all of that stuff. Because, you know, I had a very academic upbringing and I didn't have like parents bankrolling me, you know, through this. So I from the first rupee I earned in Bombay, that went back into my journey there. So I did it the real hard way, I guess. A lot of people assume if you're a foreigner and you come from India, from Australia or elsewhere, you just got rich NRI parents that are helping you out. But I actually didn't have that. So I kind of, I guess when I say I moved to Bombay after that time, that was the time that I was like, okay, nope, I'm putting some money down that I've earned in Australia recently, and it's going straight back into this. And I'm not just seeing, you know, I'm committing to my life. This is now my life. And I will be a working actress, whatever that means. So that was actually the year that I finally said no to an offer at a law firm that had been waiting for me. So it was a very, really intense transition from the life that I'd meticulously been training for, I guess, as a good Indian girl. And, you know, the child in me that was like, I'm going to do this now.
Yeah. So actually, when I was looking you up, you have your law degree. Your parents are very academic. So I was like, I wonder how they felt, or even for you to make that decision to say, okay, I've been on this path, but now I really feel like I need to give this acting thing a fair shot. Like I need to put all my eggs in that one basket and really try to give it a go. Tell me about that decision.
Well, I didn't really share too much with them, to be honest. Like they knew what I was doing loosely, but I mean, it's kind of an urban legend now about how I told them I was going to India to study further. That was what I told
You told
them.
them you're studying what?
I told them I was doing like extra studies at a university in Delhi.
Oh.
It was really something I did on my own. You know, I don't have parents who were really involved in what was happening growing up. They're pretty hands off. They both worked full time. My brother and I were really independent, and so that this was no different, really. I think they always just left me to my own devices and were like, she's going to figure it out, whatever it is. And you know, it came good. So I guess they came around when it came good. But yeah, I mean, I think they knew that I was a performing artist and I'm a Bharatanatyam dancer. Dance and acting has been my first love since I was a child. There was no question that that's what I wanted to do since I was a child. So it didn't surprise them one bit, but I think they were shit scared, if I may say so, because it's a really ridiculous prospect. And I was coming at it from a really unique perspective. Like I came at it as a Hindi speaking person, as, you know, someone who was quite rigorously Indian in many ways. So there's a lot of, you know, India is quite stratified. It's quite feudal. So sometimes people, when they come from overseas, there's a certain faux privilege that they exude about being other. And I really strip that when I'm in India. I'm basically from Delhi. Like it's like I've just walked out of my Tayaji's house or my uncle's house. So I think my dad was like, you're too simple for this world. Like he was like, I need you to like behave a little bit more, you know. And I didn't understand what he was talking about, but I understood in India later that the world is so stratified, and you know, the way people wield power is something so foreign to me, and the projection of power. And you know, the Indian film industry is rife with a lot of those intricacies. So that was a really interesting thing to navigate as well. You know, it was a very intersectional journey, I would say. Like there were just different things happening all the time that I was trying to figure out. And yeah, I kind of only had the cues and the whispers of my parents and what I knew from growing up. I didn't really have guidance per se about how to navigate that world from them.
So when you're in Mumbai, you were mentioning before you really wanted to focus on indie films, which is
Mm-hmm.
great because honestly, some of the best movies are indie films. But in terms of actually then, getting those, the network, getting the money, being able, because Mumbai is actually a very expensive city too. When did you kind of go, okay, maybe I should give these mainstream Bollywood films a chance?
Well, luckily, I kind of always managed to make ends meet. It was through the theater, and um, I had a few like commercials and trying to think, wow, it feels like a really long time ago now. Like that life, it kind of gets me in the gut a bit because it was a soul searching time. And yes, somehow I made it work. I would do supporting, like I was told point blank I'd never be a lead actress. Like I was not lead actress material. I was too dark. I was too short. I was all of these things that they tell you to make sure that you just stay away. Because I think some people really initially were a little bit fearful of how much gumption I had. And I was like, I'm here to do it. I'm going to do it. And this is 10 years ago, right? This is not today. This is not even 3 years ago where people talk about feminism, where people talk about the need to respect women in the workplace. Like this was the end of like a very dark phase and a dark underbelly in the misogyny of how this world worked, particularly towards women who had no contacts in that industry. So yeah, I mean, making it work, I just chose the dignity of labor. So I kind of booked maybe a film a year in a supporting role for like the first 2-3 years. And then the theater, actually, I was a lead in a big production that paid me okay. But the best thing about India is that you don't get paid for rehearsals. So you have to actually find a way to earn money while you're rehearsing a play or a musical. I don't know if that's changed now, but definitely back then. So there would be months where I was working like 17-hour days with no paycheck. And it was tough. I literally, I'm thinking as I say this, going, how did I pay rent? There were definitely the times where I was freaking out, going, but I loved my apartment. I actually only just let my apartment go of 10 years last month. It was my home. It was a beautiful space in Bandra. And yeah, Bombay became like this very strange reality all of a sudden. It was like a total reversal of anything I'd known. And my apartment was like a safe house from whatever happened during the day.
But that's why I really have a great amount of respect for women like you that went to Mumbai. Because I remember when I was there, I couldn't deal with it. I actually like decided, I saw for a bit and I was like, you know what? I can't, I'm not cut out for this because you're right. 10 years ago, maybe it's changed now, but it was a very difficult time to be a female in the business, especially a female with no connections, no person that's going to be like, hey, don't mess around with her. And I
Yeah, be
really
like,
felt
hey,
that.
don't go to that guy's meeting, like that,
Yeah. And I remember I did have some great people there that looked out for me, but I was just tired of constantly having to watch my back. And so I had to kind of weigh the pros and cons. And that's why when I see you and you continued on, I'm like, I have mad respect for you because I know, having tried to be there, that it's so difficult. It's so difficult.
Thank
So
you. I really appreciate you saying that because it has been an immensely difficult journey. I'm actually writing a book about it.
I know, and I want to get to that because I know you're
Oh
going to
God,
talk
how
all
do you
about
know?
that.
I was like,
Oh, honey, I do my research, so don't worry. I know we're gonna get
okay.
to that. You're joining the theater circuit. Obviously, it's very difficult, but then where I think really people took notice of you, where I know a lot of people were like, "Did you see her? Did you see her?" Besharam. I'm gonna bring that up. I know you probably talked about that a lot, but I think that is a movie that really made other people notice you. I'm just seeing that from an outsider's perspective. Like I remember you had quite a lot of promotional push behind you. Tell me about that film though. Like when you got that film or heard about it, why did you kind of pursue that?
Well, first of all, when you're offered a role opposite Ranbir Kapoor, who at the time had got like 2 film fairs, he was at the top of his game. You don't say no. Okay.
Of course.
Like what, that was the biggest opportunity that had ever been presented to me. So to say no would have been daft. I had actually been offered another film that year, which was an indie film, and I had to choose between the two. And I actually was like, oh, which one should I do? And both directors were like, no, no, you need to do this film. It was an interesting experience, you know, because I think if I had have gotten Besharam much earlier, or a film like Besharam much earlier, I think it would have been much better for my mental health, because I wouldn't have gone through kind of that really, really deep underbelly of Bollywood before getting there. And when you've been through that, to then be in a space where you're pitted as an equal with these very big stars, it kind of is difficult because you've got a lot of trauma already from the rooms you've been in, the auditions you've done, the kind of things people have said to you. And you're in that room and you're like, no one understands where I'm coming from now. If I had come off the plane from Australia, actually it wouldn't have been very different, because, you know, I would still have had my foreign privilege and all of those things. And I can, you know, manage in any situation. But I had seen a side of Bombay and India where I had stripped all of that privilege away. Like I was lining up in the backlot auditions of Andheri with thousands of people. And that is a pretty traumatic experience, you know, and you really value what you're doing after that. But there was I guess, and this is like probably the most candid I've ever been about it. I loved the film. I love dancing. You know that about me. That's my first love, and the film was a musical number. So I was like, yes, I'm very filmy. Like I love that stuff. But from an emotional point of view, I think that navigation was really tough, because I really had no one that understood that. From what I know, there aren't many people that make that transition. You know, it's not very easy to do that. And you know, I was denigrated in the way, and I was shamed in the way that women are. You know, people would say things in the press like she got the role because she dated her director, and all of these nonsensical things. And actually the heartbreak of that at the time, again, being really young and so optimistic, and a woman who was following her dreams, so you can imagine how fragile that is. To have those things said about you, it kind of took over from the narrative of me actually fulfilling my dream. And that, for me, unfortunately, is a big part of my experience of Besharam. And it's probably why I don't talk too much about the film. It was the 7-year anniversary recently of its release, and I cried. You know, it was a really tough time for me. And people don't really check in to see how that girl's doing. You know, the most vulnerable people get the least check in. So it's made me very, very strong, and, you know, equipped me to handle anything on any set. And I mean, the gamut of sets that I worked on, you know, from indie films to, like, I can handle anything basically, which is great. And yeah, I guess that's kind of, you get my drift.
Besharam was seen as a failure at the box office. And I feel like when a film flops in Bollywood, they end up blaming the cast, even though they have nothing to do with the storyline or the production or whatever. And knowing that you were the leading lady, I kind of felt like sometimes the media wasn't fair to you. And that's why I wanted to bring it up, because I just wanted to ask you, do you feel like Bollywood has been fair to you?
Definitely wasn't at that time. It definitely was horrendous to go through that.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've ever spoken about this, and it's actually tearing me up. But I was haunted by it for many years. You know, I still get haunted by it. It was horrible to wake up in the morning and see absolute nonsense written about me. And, you know, my health was really bad because of the stress. And I was alone, you know, and I think they took advantage of that I didn't have anyone. And no one checked in, you know, no one from the cast, from whatever, like, it doesn't matter. Like, and that, I was so lucky I'd started my next film by then, Pallavi Sharda, with Ayushmann Khurrana, because I literally, I think the biggest blessing from me, from the universe, was that I wrapped Besharam on September 6th, and I started shooting for Pallavi Sharda September 7th. And then in between, I did the promo tour for Besharam, and it released in October. But I came back going, when it didn't do well, I just let go. I was like, cool. But I had to then deal with that aftermath, and the media it was like a campaign to slander me. It wasn't unfair. It was like harsh. Like, people that knew me were like, whoa. And then people that didn't know me were like, oh, there's that girl that we read. You know what I mean? Like, so then what that does to your person, when you have spent so much time working with integrity, like I got Bishram after 4-5 audition rounds, and the reason, and people are like, why did a new girl get the film? It's simple, because when a new girl is on set, she's the weakest link, and she will give her dates. She will be the person, you know what I mean? Like, it's easier for a production, quite frankly. They don't need a fourth big star. So I was like, there's a logic to this, guys. But I had luckily, in a sense, already experienced failure in that industry. None of the films I'd been a part of before that had succeeded. So I'd always, and then I had never let it had never affected me personally before, I guess. I had always appreciated being a working actor. But yeah, I think the misogyny and the slander was something that I think, as a really young woman, I don't wish upon anyone, because it can really shatter you.
I think these things that I, as an outsider, have seen have made me respect you. Because I know, even though I wasn't there with you, because my journey I'm in the industry, right? I, have tried it. I felt for you at that time. And for you to, like, I just always feel like, people see the glitz and glam of any of our jobs. They don't see the dark side, or the times when everybody was like, well, you sucked. And you're like, but I don't suck. Do you not look at everybody else, right? I mean, I get it too. I mean, if my interview bombs, people are not going to blame anyone else but me, right? So I always like to bring that up, because I think this business, you have to be tough. And a lot of people try to be in this business, they don't survive because they just can't handle it. So for you to 10 years later still be in this industry, I am very proud of you. I know it's not easy, but I'm very proud of you. So you should be proud of yourself too for that. Let's move on from Besharam. So
before I start like tearing my hair out.
No, but I think it's important to hear that from people. I think, especially because I am in the business, I know.
And I think vulnerability is something that we have not, in this industry, been taught to wear on our sleeve. It's very much, and I think that was always my undoing, actually. It's like referring to what I was saying earlier. I didn't explain it well, but the idea of projection of power, it's kind of linked to that idea of how you have to come across as unstoppable, unscathable, all of those things. But I was always like, yo, I'm a normal girl from the suburbs of Melbourne. And I've really worn that identity on my sleeve because of girls like you and me, because of girls, the thousands and millions of Indian girls around the world who have not grown up in India and who have already faced trauma being a brown girl growing up in the world. So it's actually unnatural for me to walk in and be like, yo, what's up? I'm so cool. It's like, no, I'm not so cool. I had a monobrow at school and was beaten up. Like, I wasn't the cool kid in the room. I was the nerd and the loser. So for me to all of a sudden try and be like, I'm the greatest person in the room, it was such an unnatural way of behavior to me. And but it also opened me up to, feeling a lot when things were not going well. And I think now it's made me, has given me a wealth of emotional kind of reach when it comes to the work that I do. But it's also made me realize the importance of speaking about this stuff and being vulnerable. I mean, I wish that was more encouraged when I was younger. Unfortunately, when I was younger, to show that side, because I used to believe in human empathy and I'd be like, okay, someone will want to be nice. I realized that actually that's the time that people are the most exploitative. So for me, it's going, okay, how do we, in our generation, create an example where vulnerability is okay, and there will be empathetic mentorship from the likes of you and myself.
I always like to make sure people know this, that it's not just with you. It happens to all of us, but you got to be tough. Like, no one else is going to help you get through that but yourself. So that's why I bring this up. But I want to move on to better things. Okay, so let's do that. While you were doing Indian cinema, you were also kind of going back and forth with Western, right? Because I do know you popped up in a couple other like Australian productions. Obviously, you've gone on now to work with one of my favorite directors, Gurinder Chadha. Moving back into the West, like, was that easy to kind of go between two worlds?
No, it was actually almost harder, strange. Like my and it's obviously writing about this now, it's a little bit more distinct in my head. Like I'm able to articulate it better. But after Besharam, I did Havai Zada, then I did Begum Jan and Begum Jan came after a gap. And I think it's worth saying that in Begum Jan, I played a sex worker, and it was a very raw film and a really raw role. And that was my fuck you. Can I swear on this show? That was my fuck you to the archetype of the Bollywood heroine that had kind of been the reason that I ended up becoming so quashed. I was like, let's just like, I was like, everyone slut shames. Let's just play a prostitute. Let's just put it out there, like, and take away shame and fight that stigma and take away victimhood from this profession. So that was kind of, I think, what I was craving after those two films. I thought that was a great experience. I played a dancer. I don't know if you've seen the film, but for me, as in the mainstream films I've done, that's probably my proudest work performance-wise. And it was a polar opposite experience to Besharam. So just to give some balance to the conversation. But having said that, a lot of the spiritual damage was already done. So it was really after that, my spiritual journey really kind of commenced in the sense of how do I recover myself and integrate that recovery with my art, because as a performing artist, the two things are very, very closely linked. You can't really, it's just pretend that you walk into something without what's inside you. You're bringing that into the job every day. And I had this kind of sense and this inkling. I was doing a lot of like advocacy work in Australia. I've always been very strong with, the voice that I have in terms of multicultural representation, and I was curating, co-curating arts festivals. So my work in the arts, as distinct from film, has always remained very strong. And I think, again, this was something that people didn't understand about me working in the film industry, was that I was multi-hyphenated. I had various things going on. It wasn't just like, here I am going to be a supplicant to you so you can give me a role. But within that, what I was realizing that Australia really was turning its mind to multicultural representation, and the world was. And this had been something I'd kind of been waiting for, because as you mentioned, Gurinder Chadha was one of the only directors that gave us content that made us feel seen. And so it was like, I think the year after Havai Zada released, or maybe Begum Jan, the year that I got an agent for the first time in Australia. And I got to tell you, it was almost more scary than getting a film or something in India, because
really,
not from it. I felt like totally safe, and I was so excited about working with people that I was on the same wavelength but like, what if they didn't want to take me on? Like, do you know what I mean? It was that thing of going, oh, I'm going to be the brown girl in the room again. That was a scary thing growing up in Australia. So all of a sudden, all of that's coming back to you. And you're like, what if they're like, oh, we already have a brown person on our books? Because these are the things that I had heard over the years. So that point of view, I mean, it was, but obviously that didn't happen. They were like, yes.
So just to recap though, when you decided to get your agent and to start auditioning or going for Western content, at that time again, this was like 5-6 years ago, right? When you're doing this?
4 years ago.
4 years ago. So it sounds like they were like, oh, we welcome South Asian actors. Yes, let's have lots of faces. Or because sometimes I hear that it's like you get a room full of South Asian actors for that one role, right? So were you being sent for roles that just fit you regardless of what you look like?
I think there's been a mixture of both. Like I was in Lion, that particular role required an Indian origin actress. Pulse, which was my first Australian film, definitely was open to all ethnicities. Um, Last year, I did a brilliant show called Les Norton for the ABC here. I could have been anything. I played Georgie Berman, who was a bookkeeper in an underground casino in 1985 in Sydney in the red light district, and was just dressed in all this 80s attire. I'll send you photos of this stuff, it's so great. And that was just incredible to like just play a woman, like a badass woman from 1985 in Sydney, despite the fact that I was brown. And for me, that was a real thing of going, we were already here. Like there were brown people in Australia that, obviously we've always had our Indigenous population, but in terms of migrants, and it's really interesting for me to I'm such a nerd about the waves of migration to Australia. So I go, okay, is she from an Anglo-Indian community because they arrived in 68 or da, 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 da. So I love weaving in my backstories these tales of representation as well. Like I'm totally into it.
I feel like you've done quite a bit of kind of period films, but I think
I
that's like really
really
cool because I
have.
feel like you're really into history.
It's funny again that you say that. I've learned so much about India's colonial past through my movies. Beecham House is set in 1795, which is not a movie, it's a series. Hawaii Zada was 1895 and Begum Jam was 1947. So you've got 3 points in the British Raj, and one I play a princess, the other I play a courtesan dancer, and then I play a sex worker. And it's almost like this strange societal demotion in my characters timeline wise. And it's, for me, almost a symbol of what colonization did to India. Do you know what I mean? It's like this woman's body, the body of woman is colonized as the country was. And so I think I'm really lucky to go so deep into my research and have the kind of access that I have to those stories. And you learn. So, I mean, what comes out on screen is 5% of the work that we do behind the scenes. And yeah, I'm very, very grateful.
You strike me as someone, when they're presenting you, I think, films or roles, you strike me as someone that doesn't just take a role because, oh, it's a job, or, oh, like I gotta keep working. I feel like this is the impression I get out of you. Like you would rather just have gaps until you get a role where you're like excited. And all the roles that you've done, a part of a few that we've already talked about, are really interesting. You have great directors. You've got, obviously these moments of history, which is like cool to explore and kind of be transported in time to be like, this is what I would have felt like for this person that I'm playing, right? Like, so I feel like in that sense, like when you choose a role, if I see you coming out with a new movie or whatnot, I know you've chosen the role because it's really spoken to you, as opposed to being like, well, it's a job, I need to pay the bills.
Yeah, that's a really apt observation. I mean, I'm very much a character-based actress in that point of view. And it's funny because this is what was said to me early on in my time in India, like, you're a character actor, you're not lead actor material, because there was this kind of dichotomy between the two, again, 10 years ago. But I'm so glad that I've stuck to that core, because it's enabled me to shapeshift. And I'm a real chameleon. I can look people don't recognize me one job to another. Literally never has anyone seen me and been like, you, like on the street, and like they might have seen my work, but they'll just stare at me and be like, you look familiar. Like it's just never happened, because I shapeshift really, really dramatically. And I enjoy that process. It's so much a part of why I do it. And I think maybe coming from a Bharatanatyam or a dance background, that the costuming, the kind of the process of turning into something else is so much of what drew me to the performing arts. It's not about me, Pallavi, presenting as something, or present, or wanting to be seen as me. It's about, classic things, which are turning into the story, a part of the story. So yeah, again, I've got very patient agents who know what it's about for me, and especially with what the last 10 years have been and how tough they have been. I don't think it's worth it any other way, personally. I don't have a need to see myself on screen. I don't have a need to be a film actress. I have a need to tell stories. I can talk underwater. Wow, you're asking really good questions, and I'm just like giving you these full essays.
Well, thank you. And that's the purpose of this. I can see you getting behind the camera.
Definitely, it's definitely where my head is at the moment. I'm writing at the moment. Got a few things in my head, but it's a really interesting time having, for the first time, let go of my home in Bombay and really kind of surrendering to the world that we're in right now. I'm trying to use this particular moment to gestate, because I've been on a wild ride for the last decade, and COVID has been a really interesting full stop. And it's forced me to make a certain decision that I've been struggling with for a while. And I can see that, you know, I think creativity and inspiration comes from a stillness, and hopefully on the other side of the stillness that I'm in right now, that will happen.
With everything that you were mentioning with the spotlight on diversity, I feel like that diversity spotlight isn't just on Hollywood. It's also made people in Bollywood speak out against nepotism, against colorism. So I'm sure you still have your connections back there. If you could see some positive changes happen, maybe you're already starting to see them, what do you think Bollywood is going to do with this movement?
It's been really interesting. I mean, we all kind of know what's happened this year, and it's very intense. I won't really get into it, but with these conversations, the first time I heard an actor, a big actor, use the word nepotism 3 years ago, I was mind blown. Like, I was like, whoa, I actually never thought it would happen. I never thought that this change would happen while I was still working. I mean, I think Begum John released that year, so I was still technically really involved in the industry. And actually, I was asked when you mentioned it, I was asked by the media, what do you think about that? And I was really honest. And I remember like my co-actresses just kind of staring at me, because I was kind of at a very no bullshit threshold by then, and it was a really empowering time for me. I was shooting my first Australian show, and I'd flown back to do promo work in Bombay, and we were playing sex workers at the time of partition, and it was a really raw film. So I was like, screw everything, just say. And I was really open. I think that was the last time I really candidly talked about it to the Indian media, but it's been a problem. It's the modus operandi of that industry, of that country. Let's not say that industry. It's a very feudal place. Canada, Australia, we're very lucky. I mean, these are liberal democracies that have also been based on feudal histories, that have also partaken in nefarious things very recently. You know, Australia's got a very racist past. The whole of Northern America is founded on racism. So it's a worldwide issue. But in Bollywood, there was a really particular eeriness to it that I couldn't really quite figure out how to navigate. You know, you didn't have the language of right and wrong. That language wasn't available to you. Now we're being given a language. Now the Me Too movement has happened in India. So you can point to markers and precedents of things where literally 10 years ago, if I said any of these words, people would ask me to leave the room because I thought I was too smart or I was difficult, or, you know. So yes, already there's a change. The fact that I can have this conversation with you, that's already a change. Like, and I'm willing for it to be in the public domain without fear of someone attacking me for that. That is a change. And these are the baby steps that I would like to see, mainly in the matter of discourse. And yes, we will see it on our screens. We already are. The democratization of screen content through OTT platforms are clearly showing what they do, and all of those things. So it's all for the good. Sometimes I think that I wish I had just practiced law for 5 years and then gone to be an actress.
You could have.
I so could have, you know, and I was just so desperate. I was so desperate to get to my future and to do that thing that I dreamt of doing. And Now I'm like, oh, you could have been so much more empowered, but who knows, maybe I would have been shut down even more. Like I was shut down enough for having a law degree. Imagine I was a practicing lawyer.
I also think like when people decide, oh, I'm going to do that later, I sometimes feel like there's that fear that they won't actually ever get around to it.
Yeah.
So that's why I always think like even though you're young, I mean, most people when they try to do something like pursue a career in entertainment, you got to do it when almost like you don't know any better. I kind of feel like you need to.
Yeah, I had the fire in my belly. I was just like, this is going to be there. I mean, even now, technically, I could become a lawyer. You know what I mean? Like, if I really wanted to. So that is still there, but I wouldn't have been able to say that necessarily about film. Yes, there's a situation where maybe I wouldn't have ended up within the dark and underbelly of Bombay because, you know, progress that was made in those interim. I mean, social media changed the game. Let's put it that way. 2010, there was no social media. 2013, 14, all of a sudden it was everywhere. So even me, I mean, I think we're that crossover millennial generation where we are the last ones that would have started college without it. So imagine knowing that game before you came into this industry. That's a huge advantage because I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know that people would take images of me and it would multiply. Like it was brand new, and it happened the year that Besharam came out. So even more so, all of those things that were happening were protracted because no one even knew what the word troll was until that year. Like it wasn't even a word. So imagine knowing how to defend yourself against that kind of cyber bullying before it happened. I experienced it as it happened, like what the language of it was. And then later started to read up on women who'd experienced similar things and how they combat it. And I was like, oh, this isn't just me that's getting attacked. Like a lot of people go through this. And now it's obviously part of whatever, like, but yeah, I think it was a very interesting time to go from being, you know, like 20 to 25 in a sense, because it's two different worlds completely.
Now, let me ask you, if you were offered something in Indian cinema again, like have you said goodbye completely, like I'm moving on, or would you go back?
No, I would 100% go back. I miss it so much. I so miss being on an Indian set. I was lucky with Beecham House that we shot in India for part of it. So I was just like feeling like I was at home. I was sort of the local guide for everyone. And when something ridiculous would happen on set, I was just unfazed and was just walking people through it. I was like, no, that's okay. The horses do that sometimes. Like, but no, 100%. I did go through a phase of saying no to things. You know, and they're great projects that I see on screen now. I'm like, I should have done that. And I did go through a phase of actively perhaps just burning a hole in this career that I'd created from scratch. And I started to live in Bombay rather than work there. You know, I still had my place until a month ago. But for 3 years, I was just going back there between shoots elsewhere in the world and seeing my friends and living a beautiful life, a really healed, fulfilling life. I'd actually go there to go to my yoga studio. And it was a very obscenely highfalutin way to live. But I think now, it's what I'm made to do. I miss speaking Hindi. I miss acting in Hindi. I miss the propensity to tell stories about rural India. I mean, I'm first generation. My nani and nana were from a town in Western UP called Bulandshahr, and my nani passed this year, and just being around her family in America and hearing that boli, that tongue, you know, it gets me really deep. Same with the Punjabi side of my family, and same with my dance. Like I miss dancing like an Indian woman, and I miss seeing that in its most beautiful form, which as a child I always thought was through celluloid. I always wanted to dance on screen. That was my childhood dream, you know, that was where it came from. So that little girl is still alive and kicking.
She'll always be there.
I'm glad I salvaged her.
Now, obviously, you're in Australia. Do you think maybe you might then go to America? Do you think you ever find yourself in New York or LA?
Yes, very much so. I've like my parents, my mother's families all on the East Coast of the US. I really miss them. I feel very kind of hybrid American, even though I'm Australian, because my nani and nana lived there. Like all of my family is American. All of my cousins are American. I spend 2 months of the year in New York usually, and for the last 5 years, I've lived in New York for 3 months of the year. And same with LA, I probably spend not as much time, but because of it being like a stopover point to Australia, I end up spending time there. I love those cities because, like Bombay, they are a beautiful combustion of energy of so many people from different walks of life coming together to create something from nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I need to be in that sort of energy. I really struggle with cities that are all about established order and just going with how things have always been done. So yeah, God willing.
Yeah, because I think right now, especially Hollywood, there's a lot of South Asian talent there. And I think in order to be part of the process, you got to be there, right? So I think that would be very interesting for you to consider to say, okay.
I love that you're like mentoring me now. You're like, come on, Pallavi.
Well, actually, speaking of mentors, I know you said before, well, first of all, remember I told you, is because I did go through that like initial, like, oh, should I pursue Bollywood or modeling? I'm happy that I listened to my instinct and I chose media. I'm honestly, was meant to work in media. So I love that I've done this. But I want to bring out other women because I feel like I'm in a unique position where I can share those stories, where I can kind of create this almost like, I don't know, sisterhood.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I really respect you for it. It's still rare. Do you know what I mean? Unfortunately, it is still a rarity, but it is the women actually that I know in New York, LA, Toronto, Vancouver of Indian origin that have that kind of mutual respect. In the UK, but I know less there. And again, seeing my younger cousins, right? And the oldest girl in a family of 12 grandchildren. And I have 6 younger cousins that are young women. And I'm like, I need these girls to feel empowered. I want them. I have a little plug. Can I just plug my younger cousin? She's Miss Teen USA Massachusetts, which is a big deal. She's the
What's
first
her name?
Indian origin. Her name is Anika Sharma.
Okay, everyone go look her up. Follow her.
Okay. But yeah, but that's what I mean. Like, I know I've played some role in allowing them to feel like they can be a part of these spaces. And that's kind of what we have to foster, because in 10 years where, it's going to be these girls that are going to be handling stuff. And for our daughters,
that's absolutely true.
They'll be handling it for our daughters. So we need to create that legacy. We need to create that sense of we're not up against each other. We're here to support each other. And I think that's one of the most obscene things that migrant consciousness can do to you, is to bring down other people that are minorities, because you are posited as the thing that goes against a host community, the thing that goes against the mainstream, and you're given like X amount of space. People compete for that space. That's how colonization happened. That is how, divide and conquer happens. And so I think it's really important to fight those instincts of survival, which is, it comes from a place of wanting to survive, to say, no, if we collaborate, we can actually create more space, new spaces. And, we don't need those tables that we've always been vying for a seat at. And I think, I know this of myself, maybe you went through it too at the time that we first met around 10 years ago. There definitely was a sense of, I need to be accepted by my white peers. For me, like, will I ever be accepted by them? And it was a subconscious thing that I had always cultivated growing up. Even though I thought I was fiercely independent, it was just a seed of like otherness that I knew existed within me. And I think about being able to remove that entirely, because that seed can be really damaging. That seed is what allowed me to get affected when I was in Bombay. That seed is what made me vulnerable. That seed is what made it easy for people to bully me later in my life, even though I looked the part, even though I had the same skin color. Like, it didn't matter what they pointed at. It was, you've already been treated that way. So I really, really want the next generation of girls to kind of not have that in them.
I think you and I are very similar in that aspect, that I feel like when we started off our careers, I think the decision makers, they're the ones who decided there's only that one spot. So let's have all of them compete. And that's where I feel like we were almost made to be each other's competition. Like I know from our meetup backgrounds, I look back at that time and I go, you know what? I wish maybe things had been different because I know I am so proud of when I see girls doing well. But at that time, I feel like we were like not encouraged
It was
to.
toxic, man. I really struggled. Like I came out of that feeling really icky, and regretted going, you know. I regretted it because I was like, I was so sick. I should have just not gone. All it did was really slice a bit of my
No, I'm glad you
self-confidence.
went. That's how we met. So
That's
no
true. That's
regrets,
true.
okay?
No regrets. I do need to speak to you more. You need to actually be my mentor in life.
Okay, I'll try. You can
Um,
be we'll be each other's mentor. But I just feel like when we empower each other, when we support each other, we take that power away from the decision makers that are trying to pit us against each other. Like I always feel like if you can see her, you can be her. So that's why for me, my personal mission right now is instead of following the collective and being like, oh, South Asians only get certain stories, you know, during Diwali or Vaisakhi or when some big Bollywood actor has something going on. I'm working in North American media. It's so important for me to have this show so that I could take voices that don't get on mainstream and say, we have so many talented people doing big things. Let's celebrate them. And if another girl can see someone
and
like
it's
you,
not
she can
other.
be you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I think you're, and this is the thing, like I really resonate with women, particularly of Canadian background. Australia and Canada have like a strange like synergy. I think there's like this Commonwealth thing, but Canada's a little bit like more with it in
Do you want
terms
to
of
be an honorary Canadian? We'll welcome you. Come.
I would love that. I would love that. Where are you at the moment? You're in Toronto?
I'm in Toronto, yeah. I've got my
Okay.
Toronto sweatshirt, trying to
I
represent.
love Toronto. I've spent a bit of time there because I have had to be there waiting for my visas to come through for the US and things like that. I often get flown there. And also for TIFF 4 years ago when
Oh,
Lion came out.
yeah.
And it was an exceptional city.
Okay, Pallavi, let's actually then talk about, I know obviously right now you're doing a lot of thinking, but you had mentioned before you're working on a book. So tell us a little bit about it. And first of all, where did the idea come? Like, why were you like, I need to write a book?
I think it happened while I was in Bombay. Like I knew I was always a writer. Maybe it's my nerdy background. You know, I studied law and media and, you know, was training to be a journalist. And I had an experience that you might relate to of being told that I was too brown to work in the media in Australia, which is actually one of the reasons that I was like, well, I'm just going to go follow this childhood dream then. Like, let's just do the other impossible thing. So I,
I like you make it tough for yourself. You never had an easy choice available. You're like media as the one brown girl or Bollywood.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And so these are the conundrums. This is the reason I'm writing the book because it's very in line with the conversations we've had. Delving deeper, it's very much a part of my psyche. It's told in the first person, and it is talking about what it is to grow up in a cross-cultural environment in a country like Australia as a child, and then choose to go and work in the world's largest culture industry as an outsider, and then come back to the country of your birth as an outsider yet again. And these very dilemmas that we encounter, because I think they're invisible to a lot of people. I think that these are the thoughts and the inner workings of, you know, someone with minority consciousness that often don't get spelt out. You know, a lot, we talk about Black Lives Matter, we're talking about a lot of these things, especially with Me Too, and you look at survivors of those things, you look at the victims of race, hate crimes, and we never get to hear, I mean, I'm not victimizing myself in that way, but I'm saying we never get to really hear about, or if we, okay, let's put it this way, if we do get to hear about it, maybe not enough people listen about the inner workings of being on the other side. So I was kind of getting a bit tired of people just being like, really? Oh, really? You felt that way? You know, like when I would say it was tough growing up in Australia. So I thought, well, what better way to talk about it than to talk about it? You know, the power of language has been a really interesting rediscovery through writing the book. And I'm looking forward to sharing it.
We're excited too. What about then in terms of other projects and film, TV, anything that's you're working on?
I have a British Netflix show coming out early next year that I shot early this year, called The One. And I have a Warner Brothers feature film called Tom and Jerry coming out next year. Yeah, it's been a really, really busy, like that's why my friends were like, how are you dealing? Because you live out of suitcases. I spent 2 days in my own apartment last year. So,
What?
I mean,
That's it?
yeah.
So
Yeah.
really, I know you were sad about letting your apartment go, but I think it makes sense if you're not there.
Oh, it totally makes sense. No, it was crazy that I had it. Like I never went there. I definitely want to have a home in Bombay always. It's where I grew up. You know, there's a lot of really great memories, and I miss it terribly. I miss the craziness. I'm very great. I mean, I know I've told a very woeful but honest story about my time there, but what a ride. The stories of those nooks and crannies of that city will forever be with me, and I'm so grateful to that city. I think for all of its hardship, its spirit really is undeniable.
Well, thank you so much. I don't want to take too much of your time. You've been honestly such a pleasure. So I hope I can have you on sooner than later. So let's not do another 10 years. I don't think I
No,
can
let's do
handle
one
it.
a year. How about that?
Yes, I love that. Now that I know how to, you know what's so funny? I've actually like don't even know why I didn't think of you earlier. Like I was just like during this lockdown, I was like, now that I don't have to wait for people to be here in person, I'm like, I have a total open wish list. I'm like, who do I want? And so I was like, who would be interesting? And that's why when I follow you, right? I think you popped up in my news feed and I was like, yes, I think she would be great, right?
I'm
And
so
I'm
glad
like,
you did. I was so excited when I got your message. I was like, ah.
I always appreciate when I do have history with someone because I feel like the reason why this show has been so successful and getting people to open up is because I've built my reputation around being someone that you can share. I always tell people I'm not out to get you. Like, I want you to feel safe and share your story because it's a story worth sharing. People want to hear it, right? Like, these things happened to you. It made you who you are.
And it's so funny because a lot of what my fans, I feel weird even saying that word, write into me and they're like, where have you gone? Like, because a lot of people loved that film. A lot of people loved Faizada. Like, and then I was the host of the IPL in 2016, which everyone saw. And they're like, where are you, dude? Like, you know, I really like, people were horrible, you know, like, how do you say that? You can never really say that, that you're not always a commodity to be sold, you know? But yeah, I mean, the book's been really cathartic. It's difficult to like, I think I'm forcing myself to speak about it publicly so I go through with it.
No, it's true because when you do the book promo, you're going to have to talk about it, right?
Yeah, and it's tough. It's really tough to like speak your truth, that especially like when it came good, like, you know, Besharam came out, like, still, I mean, forget that it didn't do well. I was a lead actress in a major Bollywood film. That's never going away, right? Like I succeeded in my childhood dream. That took me a long time for me to say to myself, and to give myself that pat on the back, because I'd been listening to other people. And then I was like, whoa, when I was 3, I said I wanted to go to Bollywood and become an actress. I have done that and more. Like,
yes, that's why you should be very proud.
Not in my wildest dreams did I actually think I would be able to do it. Let's be honest. Like, even 10 years ago, I was like, this isn't really going to happen. And it happened. And, you know, that's the power of dreams. It's a power of self-belief. But somewhere I let the balance went off, you know, because I think people were threatened by that fire in me, because that's all I had. I had nothing else. I was just like, I can do this. I know I can do this well. I'm good at this.
But I'm so glad that you opened up with us. Honestly, girl, it was so good to be reunited with you. Honestly, I'm so glad we did this.
I'm so glad too. Thank you. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed my interview. For more videos like this, please subscribe to the channel.